Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert, and today I am delighted and excited to be joined by Daniel Keller, who, of course, is the co-founder of Flux. How are you, Daniel?
I'm doing well, Rupert. Thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
No, the pleasure is honestly all mine. And this is something that I was really excited to do because what I think Flux does is really highlight the broader application for a distributed ledger and really showcase just the transformational kind of application of DLT technology far beyond perhaps the realms of just trying to facilitate an alternative store of value, an alternative currency. And I'm extremely excited to get into all of that with you. And I think a good place for us to start is with Flux itself and where the project came from and what it is you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thanks for having me on. So Flux has been around for 8 years. We just celebrated our 8th anniversary. Pretty impressive when you think about it in the crypto world. You know, you've got 3 million, 4 million cryptos nowadays, and we've been in it and grinding for 7 years. We're a decentralized compute network. So really what it comes down to is in 2017, full bull run, we were looking around surveying the landscape and we said, there's a huge problem, and that's the evil empires, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsoft, so on and so forth, controlled all the back ends of the majority of these projects. So it's very difficult to call yourself decentralized or DeFi or anything like that if you run on AWS. If AWS goes down and you went down, then you're not truly decentralized, right? So we believed that we had to champion and bring the power of our data back to the hands of the people. I actually worked as a CEO in a major healthcare organization, so C-suite for the better part of 25 years. And at the end of that career, so I spent the beginning of my career working on bringing everything into, colo data centers, pulling everything together. Everybody wants to control their own data. So I spent the first 25 years centralizing. I'm going to spend the rest of my career breaking that all back apart again because it wasn't the right way to do it to begin with. But now, technology didn't present itself back then, right? So Flux has 13,000 plus decentralized systems administrators, all enterprise grade infrastructure that runs across the globe. We're the largest decentralized network in terms of data footprint over any other product. And the reason you haven't heard of Flux is because that's by design. What we're attempting to do isn't what, say, Bitcoin and what it's doing in a financial network, although it could definitely benefit from Flux. What we're looking to do is holistically look at the entire ecosystem and how can we improve these projects and make them more decentralized. So ultimately, it's been our goal. And we, whether you're running WordPress, which we run on Flux, or front ends, back ends, game servers, we have a Flux AI component that we do. We recently added DeepSeek to it, and I don't recommend to people to use it, but it's there if you want to. But long story short is we're about democratizing and putting back the data in the hands of the people, so there is no opt out; it's opt out by default. We store no data, so whether you're using Zelcore, we don't hold any private keys. It's all controlled locally. We don't have any data where you're moving funds, what you're doing. AI, we don't collect data or harvest data, extrapolate data. It's all your data. It does not go back to some central processing center that's going to use you for training models. It is yours. Why is that important? Well, if I'm entry level and I'm beginning to work into the AI sector, I don't want to share all my data that I'm using AI for. We just released Flux Intel, which basically takes contracts or business documents, whatever, summarizes them quite nicely, can do responses. Now, do you want that data going back to a central repository that now has access to all your contractual data, all your financial data, everything else? No, you don't want that. So that's really why Flux AI was born, and it was born because we could do it. We built a delivery model, a framework that'll drop down, and whether it's running a game server or running a multi-million-dollar network, you can do it on Flux.
And this is what I really want to start off with is, and I think to add a little bit of context, and we'll really run with this, we're going to get into the various things you can do on Flux, some of the things that's already being done, some of the partnerships, et cetera, et cetera. But I think so people understand the big view of kind of what Flux is doing here. It's perhaps important for us to look at the problem that you guys are trying to solve, and that is with these centralized techno feudalist overlords that literally enable the internet. And I think some people don't quite realize why there's a problem with that. If you look at the internet, some people sort of envision this kind of invisible thing that lives in the ether. Actually, it's hardware. It's a coalition of software, hardware, and et cetera, that's literally owned by a handful of companies that ultimately extract data from you. They have total control over that. What Flux is doing to me, and this is why I was so excited to get you on, is essentially taking back control of that and saying, okay, what we're going to do is disrupt this industry through the power of decentralization and put the power back into the hands of the many and take away from these Amazons, these companies that you could say have perhaps proven, in some cases, not all, that you can't rely on them. Maybe we can sort of go over that a little bit more. So core sort of at the heart of Flux, what is it you guys are trying to do? Why is this so important to you?
So excellent points there, because I think that we've gotten to the point where convenience has taken the place for privacy, security, so on and so forth. I tell people all the time, if you are utilizing Google Gmail or you're utilizing a project and you're not paying for it, you're the product. So essentially, what is the product they're selling? And if it isn't like a tangible real product or a software and they're giving it to you, they're harvesting and extrapolating your data. They're using it to build their models. Because data's gold anymore, let's face it. So, the way we looked at it with Flux is we realized very early on in the process that there had to be a better way to decentralize this data footprint. So, whether it's data storage or whether it's data in motion or data at rest, we should be able to have a product owned and operated and facilitated by the people. And that's really what disruptive technology is. Bitcoin was the greatest disruptive technology that we've ever seen. Why? Because it didn't only disrupt finance, it's disrupt all technologies. And that's what really Flux looks at. So whether it's the financial sector, or maybe the real world asset sector, or maybe it's DeFi or DePIN, whatever it is, you can make your project even deeper and more decentralized by utilizing Flux. So I very libertarian at heart. I believe that we should be able to control our data. It's our fundamentally it is us. And I think that it's going to get much progressively worse as we move through the AI world, because now we have these large major technocrats that are buying. People are all excited that Trump got elected. Now things, all of a sudden Facebook and Google are playing nice and so on and so forth. They're the same evil
Yep.
empire they were 3 months ago, right? They're going to do the same shit they did 3 months ago. The only difference is they have somebody in power now who has people that have been surrounded by him that understand the vulnerabilities of centralization, which is different from any other bull run or any other adoption phase we've had in blockchain. I've been in blockchain since 2011 ish, 2012, very early adopter. And what drew me to it was the fact that we were finally starting to see this movement, this motion of people that were not complacent and not pleased with the current financial environment. And boy, watching Doge and everything they're doing now, man, get that on the blockchain, right? We're the ones that are paying the taxes. We should know where they're going. And with Flux, not only can you do that, but it isn't owned by a centralized entity who's like, you know what? I don't like what you're doing, or I don't like what you're selling, or I don't like your business or the politics that you have. We're going to remove you from the platform. So really what it did was it took the Satoshi Nakamoto's concept of decentralization, and he envisioned it. His very first block had the chancellor bails out again, yada yada yada. With Flux, we do the exact same thing, but we are being screwed on every ecosystem. It isn't just financial. Financial is where it resonates from, but where it begins is every single technology that we are building out. And so I think what Flux really does is we've seen a movement globally away from the censorship control piece. And now people are starting to finally wake up and say, I need to understand my privacy, my security. Is this my data? Am I, where's my electronic medical records that I can carry portably? So on and so forth. So it opens up a completely different avenue for the way that people look at and plan on developing their technology.
Yeah, and this is why we're so excited to have you on, because just like, and I think you're absolutely spot on there in regards to Bitcoin, it did far more than just introduce this alternative currency system. Whether it is that today or not is an entirely different debate. Um, it introduced this kind of paradigm shift, this technology that we can harness, that Flux has essentially looked at, adopted, and now applied to actually what you could almost argue is a far broader application than just money itself. Everything, the world, the digital world as we know it, which is in the hands of those techno feudalists, Flux is challenging in the same way that Bitcoin was challenging central banks, but with far broader applications. Do you think that's a fair statement to make?
Absolutely, 110%. And I'll tell you right now, the disruptors have disrupted the disruptors.
Yeah.
We, the cypherpunks of the world, created this blockchain with the grandiose libertarian views and keep the legacy technology stacks, keep the legacy people, the people that have absolutely ruined what the internet should have been to begin with, and keep them out of the system. So what happens? We get the FTXs involved. We get the legacy bankers involved. JP Morgan's now involved. All these big players. So all of a sudden, here comes the legacy technology, and now they're the disruptors. And people are standing on the sidelines cheering for this, and they should be because it's exciting. But in reality, it's much deeper than what it is. I always look at the financial sector as where it ends, but where it begins is the data custody, how you maintain your data, your intellectual information, your IP, so on and so forth. And they're what they're doing is they're taking the drive and the function from being an originator, because now they are starting to garner that themselves. So AI isn't about AI is amazing, by the way, and we love Flux AI. It's it's an amazing product. How people are scared to death of it. They shouldn't be. They should not be. This is going to be a game changer. This is going to level set even more of what we're doing in the technology sector against the heavy hitters and the technocrats of the world. So, very exciting to see how this continues to materialize.
This is AI is a big, I think, topic broadly, but certainly when it comes to what you guys are doing. And really, I want to explore all of that in quite a lot of detail, because it's very important that we disrupt the way things are as it is, and in regards to what's currently being enabled. When we talk about these futuristic technologies, that the future is a stone's throw away, and it's here in many cases, it becomes even more important. Certainly, when you think about AI actually directly affecting human consciousness, which I have no doubt that it will do. We need some sort of a say in that, and a technology like Flux can enable that. So I do want to get into AI broadly and really sort of break down, Flux AI specifically. Before I do that, some people may be a little bit confused with how all of this is being enabled. So, using Bitcoin as that analogy, Satoshi came up with this consensus proof of work that essentially meant people, certainly in the early days, could have given their very basic hardware over to maintaining the network. How is Flux enabling? What's the kind of process or protocol like that actually enables essentially the new internet, or this kind of Web3 decentralized world that you guys are working on? How does it
Yep.
work?
Well, and that's a very astute observation. Satoshi Nakamoto's greatest quandary was, what do I do with all these additional compute resources? We need something greater than transactional validation and consensus mechanism. And that's when we sat down and we said, okay, trilemma has been kind of sort of solved here with Bitcoin, but now how do we parlay that into a bigger tech sector? So what we did is we identified, and in 2018, 2019, master nodes were on the rage. You take your crypto, you lock it in a master node, you get some ungodly, ridiculous rate of return. You know what I mean? And then a month later, the project's gone. No, the example I use today is meme coins. Same scenario. You are the exit liquidity in those projects. But the underlying technology of what masternodes does, the decentralization of the node structure that runs networks, was unbelievably fascinating to me. So I said, okay, how do we get to be an AWS, but we utilize this masternode system? We build on top of that, and that becomes basically our layer two. Okay. And that gave birth to our deterministic nodes. So basically, what we did is we took a failed kind of shitty idea and we took the technology and we built on top of that. And by the way, um, that's how we should always be iterating technology. First go rounds are always, kind of broken to say the least. But if we can find that positive piece in there, and that's what we did. We love Bitcoin. We love everybody that works on Flux loves Bitcoin. Um, because they're really, that's big brother to us, right? So as that's successful, we're successful because we're building on that technology stack, right? So we took the security of what Bitcoin is and we added in GPUs and we added in node structure, and now all of a sudden we have enterprise grade software that's maintained in, you know 80 plus countries around the world. We've got 1,300 plus decentralized systems administrators. We've got 30,000 applications running on Flux, um, and they're all decentralized. And here's the other kicker: bigger, faster, stronger, cheaper. Bigger, faster, stronger, cheaper. Right? Um, we are pennies on the dollar from AWS. And people, a matter of fact, customers, we have a hard time working with customers so they understand how is it that I'm paying this with AWS, but I'm getting the same thing from you. I don't know, by the way, you're not just getting one server with us, you're getting 3 servers with us, whereas AWS is one. And then if you want a DRP, disaster recovery plan, or if you want something added on, you're paying out the yazoo. We baked those in at the beginning of the project, and we said, this is where we believe we need to be. And I mean, technologists are flocking to it because they're starting to see a value add. I mean, we are working with multiple Fortune 100 companies that have already launched, MVPs or betas on top of the platform. So, the big question is, where the heck has Flux been, right? Um, we discovered very early on, as we were building out and laying out the strategic direction of the project, that we were going to have to get the user interface so good that people come to use it and stay. Because let's face it, if you say you're disruptive technology and somebody shows up, they deploy a server, it goes down, they have problems, the user interface is crap, they will never come back to your platform. They just won't, right? So we had to build, and it wasn't easy because everything is centralized nowadays. For instance, is two-factor authentication. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but if I'm running Flux and using Google as my authenticator, that's a problem. You know what I mean? So we had to build out D2FA, which is a decentralized two-factor authentication. We said, well, how do we tie all these applications and everything back together? We need to create a pseudo-anonymous ID. That's where Flux ID was born. So we've had to progressively almost work in reverse of what the big companies are already doing and say, where are their pain points? Where and by the way, we're all technologists on Flux. Most people are systems engineers, C-suite leadership. These are all people that have been in the tech space for years. We got a particle physicist. We've got, you name it, man. Like, we've got some crazy folks that want to see this succeed. So in the end, we realized we're not going to be pomp and fair. We're not going to be one of these projects that are out in your face. We're going to build better technology, bigger, faster, better, stronger, and cheaper. And, and that's going to take a little while to get there, and we're there. So, I think you're starting to see the momentum shift greatly. I mean, we just recently partnered with NVIDIA, which is a massive change for us. We've worked on it for 7 years to work with NVIDIA. 7 years. We partner with NextGen. We've added, the better part of 50,000 H100s to our network. All the people that are running Flux, the proof of work project, proof of useful work project, they're participating in the network as well. So it really changes how we source technology and how we strategically plan for our technology plan. The majority of the people that I see working with Flux now are CIOs, CTOs that are starting to look at how can I deliver the same level of rock solid performance cheaper and more scalable. And that's where Flux comes into play. Like that is our sweet spot.
I really want people to get their head around this. So we might be losing some people. Perhaps you're not that into tech. You haven't quite figured out the problem that we currently have with Web 2. But what I want people to envision is Flux essentially now building the new internet. And I hate to compare us with finance because I honestly think what Flux is doing is far bigger, certainly in this digital and ever increasingly digital world that we're moving towards. Things like compute, things like data storage is the oil. It already is, but it becomes more and more of the kind of oil and the kind of lubricant that enables the world we're moving towards. So Flux is essentially building the new internet. And I think one thing that you said that really highlights that is D2FA. So two-factor authentication is very centralized. You guys have built a decentralized version of that utilizing Flux, building on Flux. Now, if you can do that, you can do anything essentially and build out all of
Yep.
these applications, including AI, which we're going to get onto, which is huge.
Mm-hmm.
You can now leverage Flux to build essentially anything that we now have on the internet, but in a decentralized version that's cheaper, better, faster, censorship resistance, etc., etc., etc. And this
Yes.
is the fact that people aren't screaming more about this. I think purely, and this isn't a dig at anybody because I had to go down my own journey, is purely because it's not yet understood. And I truly believe that. It's not yet, the masses haven't quite woken up to what's going on here. We're understanding it with the financial system. So right now, literally the entire financial system is being overhauled and they're creating this internet of value that will run directly on distributed ledgers. The exact same thing applies to the internet and the digital world itself. And somebody like Flux, a company like Flux, you guys are enabling that. That's huge, right?
Permissionless too, by the way. I mean, that's a big deal. And I do agree with what you're saying, but I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that they are being utilized as a product. So if you're a new listener and you're trying to understand Flux, I've used this analogy with other people before. My mom, I had to explain what Flux was. She's like, I don't know what it is, but it sounds amazing, right? And I said, okay, imagine you were living at your house and you looked out the window and there's a guy in the front yard and he's got a clipboard and he's watching every movement you make in your home and he's writing it down, right? And then you go into your living room and there's somebody sitting in the corner. You're like, what are you doing here? I'm just writing down everything you're doing here, right? You know what I mean? And oh, by the way, you get a crappy email product, or you get a crappy, you know what I mean? It's like we wouldn't accept the level of breach of privacy that we absolutely embrace in the current technology model, right? Most people do. I think what you're starting to see is a generational shift as well. The people that are in their 30s ish, 40s, they've already started to realize that they're being gamed. And they've already have a sense of privacy anyway. These generations, especially the Gen Y, I guess it is, that's coming, or Gen Z or whatever it is.
I can't keep up
Um,
to date with all the gens at this
I
point. There's so
can't
many
either,
of
dude.
them, you know?
When you get to me my age, there's too many gens anyway.
Yeah.
But the younger generation, let's say the 20-something-year-olds, they're really starting to understand it. We see more young people wanting to work for us, wanting to be involved with us because they're starting to really understand that you're nothing more than cattle to the big data centers. You're cattle, and they're utilizing you as a product. You look at what happened with Cambridge Analytica and the data leaks out there. You know, data leaks do happen, but we should be doing everything in our power to prevent people from forcefully being opted into this. They should be able to opt out of that, be the curators of their own data, and have privacy at its heart. So, I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. Is we're looking at how this is different from other technology sets. We've always relied on, high end Web 2, heavy hitter technology folks to provide that technology set. And what we're starting to see is very quickly that becomes you and me with Flux. So that does change how we look at the internet. It takes it away from being The ideas when the internet first started is like, this cypherpunk world where we can communicate freely, we can share, we can develop. It's this town square. You hear that talk about a lot about that. But we've got the controllers, the disruptors that came in, and they're trying to attempt to basically disrupt us. It's like, hey, um, but here's the kicker. I don't think the Web 2 legacy projects can make it to Web 3. I think some of them will. I mean, we're already working with projects like Illumin, OVH, and folks like that. But you're going to see a lot of projects, a lot of big projects too, become the way of the Netscape Navigator. Because the AOL is another, for instance. There was a point in time where AOL was a juggernaut, right? It was as big as they come. They could never traverse to a cloud-based infrastructure. They could never get away from that tech spot developer's dilemma, right? So I think what you're going to see is new companies who have built on decentralized foundations start to become the new Googles, the new AWSs, so on and so forth. We're already seeing it right now. So, I tell everybody, if your C-suite isn't sitting down and talking about how you can get involved with DeepIn and Web3, then you're not doing your job as a C-suite.
Yeah. Do you know it's extremely exciting. Again, back to my point at the start about really being excited to have you on. This is huge. I mean, this can't be understated or over exaggerated enough in terms of just what's going on here. If you look at how impactful the internet is in your current day to day life, we all use and utilize it. There's issues with it. You guys are solving that and actually enabling something far beyond what we already have that has privacy, scale, and cost improvements from start to finish. And let's talk a little bit about those improvements, because one that's apparent, certainly in regards to what you've just previously said, is privacy and, of course, security. But just to talk about Flux versus, let's say, AWS or Azure or some of these other service providers right now, why, just in sort of as layman terms as possible, would people use Flux over these other companies? Because if something's innovative, right, it has to be innovative. And I think you've only got to take a look a little bit under the hood at Flux and you go, okay, I get this. People just need to, and hopefully what we're doing on this podcast is showing people that people just need to understand what's going on here.
Yeah. I would say this Flux doesn't look to completely um, dethrone Web 2. I think it's almost a symbiotic relationship, much like we had with on-prem at the beginning, Web 1 and Web 2. I look at Web 1 as on-prem, massive data centers, so on and so forth. And as they started to scale into Web 2, which is cloud-based infrastructure, people were terrified to do so. So what they did is they load balanced in both environments. They had some on-prem and they had some web to cloud scenario. That's what I did. I was a huge champion for bringing cloud onto um, several organizations because of the value add that it gave. And you're going to see the same thing with Web 3. So what I recommend is if you're working in Web 2, stay there for now, but start to beta test and bring things back to center. Start to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how can I load balance between the two platforms. Because what we see is people deploy on Web 2, they've built it on Web 2, they're running on Web 2, and then when we tell them it's as simple as dockerizing their applications to deploy on Flux, now they're all of a sudden running 20% on Web 3, 80% on Web 2, then it's 30, 70, so on and so forth. And then what we've seen is people get down to 50-50, and then eventually they're like, I'm going to switch my mentality. My primary run is going to be on DPIN and Web 3, right? What Flux is doing. My backup is going to be Web 2. This is cheaper, more scalable. I get more servers. I get all the pieces that I need. It's really geared toward the technologist. And I think what happens at the end is they realize the value add, then they start to transition. So again, I think it's an incremental process. I think as we continue to grow, I think you're going to see Web 2 start to adopt Web 3 as like almost like its little brother. But in reality, we're much more than a little brother. We're pretty badass. So yeah, I think it's going to be a change. It's going to take a while to get to that point where we've supplanted or passed Web 2.
Yeah, and I should have brought that point up in regards to we're not totally trying to eradicate Web two, more innovate it, and actually bring some of the properties
Yet,
that the space has inherently. Yeah,
yet,
absolutely.
yet.
Yeah, but I think it will,
You know,
and like I say, I think it's an educational process that people need to sort of go through and really start to look into these technologies and take them seriously, because there's a clear winner being Flux over some of the traditional sort of systems or services that are offered. And you only need to look under that hood. And I hope that people sort of stumble upon this interview and really kind of start to come to terms with that and certainly look or go deeper down the rabbit hole. One rabbit hole that I'm excited to get down with you is AI. So AI is currently, again, there's the kind of feudalist problem there, and AI is going to be an exceptionally impactful technology. AI, I think, is quite a broad term that describes many things. Let's talk about what Flux are doing in relation to AI. We know you guys are enabling the things that are done on the internet, but in a cheaper, faster, more scalable manner. How are you guys tackling AI? Because surely this is of big interest to you.
so we took it completely different. We're the antithesis of what a GPT is, or something like that. We're the polar opposite, right? They garner data. It's you opt out by, you have to actually go through a whole process, and then you're still, if you read the terms of service, not opting out to everything. You're opting out to particular facets of how you supply their data, right? Flux went and took that standpoint that we did for, Web 2, and that was, why do we collect people's data? Why would we do that? And I think the big tech companies right now are trying to scare the hell out of everybody, and they're trying to lay, it's an arms race to see who actually gets to control the input models. So, AI is really two pieces. It's an input model and an export model, right? Input drives the data set, and it creates that training model that then gives you your input out. Then you have the output model. Well, as we saw with the launch of Google's AI, the woke AI, right? They
Yep.
turned everybody in history because their data input model was flawed, because they had already manipulated and skewed that data. So, there's an old adage, history favors the victor, right? So, uh, do we really know what happened in all these wars? We know what the winners said, but we don't necessarily know what the losers said. And controlling that input model means they'll control the output models, which will then control the individuals who utilize that data. You will get the data that I tell you can get, and how it's being manipulated. Flux said, no way. For AI to be successful, we can use training models like we use Llama, we use DeepSeek, we use products like that anybody can use. We're not restricting them. But here's the kicker: we don't garner that data whatsoever. We don't do any training models. Ours is geared more toward privacy and security, rather than giving all your personal information up. AI is no more scary than a search engine. And at this point, that's what it is. It's a glorified search engine. And AI is nothing new. We've been using chatbots for years, click here to get service, and that's just a predetermined set of cues that utilize keywords that then give you information back again. All AI is doing is the exact same damn thing. It's taking what you've asked it, extrapolating that data from those input models, and that's what's giving you your output model. So this arms race that they're doing between Grok and ChatGPT and all these other AI platforms is to control the input models from the outset. And that's not good for businesses or small developers who are building their infrastructure, because they don't want to give all of their data away to the evil empire, to the great Borg, right? Um, and that's where Flux really comes into play. So I see ChatGPT isn't going anywhere, Grok's not going anywhere, but they're going to be geared more toward extrapolating your data, utilizing it, so on and so forth. Where a Flux is geared more toward privacy and security. A Fortune 100 company is not going to use an AI product that's going to garner every bit of their data. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be a slow adoption process. cypherpunks like me who want to utilize AI, but I don't want to give up all my data and all my, everything about me. I'm going to use Flux AI. I have no interest in using a Chat GPT. All that is glorified Google, uh, the way that Gmail works and so on and so forth. So, in the end, it's about placing the power back into the hands of the people. Let us create the input models, completely open source. AI is completely Flux AI is completely open source. It's completely our algorithms are published. Our whatever training models we've utilized is published, and you can switch between multiple training models. But again, you are the curator of your data. You're using what application and when that makes sense for you, and it's not being gobbled up by the evil empire.
Yeah, and I think it's really refreshing to hear someone actually talk about AI in a non kind of demonistic fashion. You know, when people talk about AI, they really talk about the kind of dangers of it. And I really like what you said there about AI in its current form is really a kind of glorified search engine that has prompts to kind of answer questions for you, and then they use your data, and this is really what all this is about: taking back that control, utilizing technologies like Flux to essentially do that, and empowering people along the way. You know,
Absolutely, and it's all about control. We've structured an entire if we have structured an entire infrastructure so that that large companies can garner that data to continue to get larger and utilize that. And I think that until we start to change our philosophy of how we provide data, we wouldn't accept this in anything else, but for some reason we give away one of our most valuable things every day, and it just doesn't make sense. And by the way, it's starting to not make sense to pretty much everyone. And the one thing I think you can learn from this Elon Musk and Doge thing and what's happening in the US right now is that AI is going to be a powerful tool, but it isn't going to be about control if we make it not about control, if we make it that it doesn't control it. Elon has talked about putting, the entire treasury on the blockchain for transparency. There's a current under an undertow that is spiraling at this point, and it's going to suck all of technology down with it at some point. And when you have awake people, and here's for instance, how did they? You've been in crypto for a long time. What was the first demonization of crypto? Well, it's only used by crooks and con men and thieves. It competes with the dollar. It's criminal action, and you still hear this nowadays. Then what was the next attack? Oh, proof of work kills the environment, right? Oh, we can't have all these data centers running and all these mining rigs, all this other. It's a waste of electricity. It's a waste of power. It's going to impact the globe. Then what we found out? Oh no, we're gonna accent that. You were burning flare offs now becomes power for us to generate, you know, uh, cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. You're starting to see these holistic, proof of use of work, which now is very green centric. We look at low power algorithms, useful resources for compute when it's not being utilized for transactional validation and consensus, and that becomes a huge win across the board. It's going to be the same way with DePIN and Web3. They're going to demonize it once they figure out it's here, by the way. And I don't, I've spent quite a bit of time in DC. They know it's here. They don't know how to handle it yet. The government has been for so many years in reactive state. In other words, if somebody puts something out on a VPS provider or on the internet, they go directly to the providers and they say, "You shut this down." They're doing something illegal. With Flux, there is none of that. I can't shut it down. You could take me to jail for the rest of my life. It isn't going to matter. It's on Flux. It's been deployed. So the government starts to have to get more proactive rather than reactive to how they address these things. So
yes. I think
it
one
does it
thing
does change the game.
I think that brings up a really good question in regards to could this be problematic? We see this kind of war in regards to technology out of China and the US. And we saw a kind of highlighting of that with DeepSeek. There was a lot, I think, of misinformation around all of that, and a lot of things that perhaps didn't quite add up with DeepSeek. But one thing that it highlighted was some of the concerns in regards to technology and enabling that technology. And if something
Oh,
like
I think it
Flux,
was yeah, it
yeah,
was wonderful to showcase why decentralized technology is so imperative. I mean, you ask them what happened with Tiananmen Square, and all of a sudden you get, I don't know. I don't know what happened then,
Yeah.
right? Because the Chinese government says, no, no, we're not going to talk about that. It's part of history and should be memorialized as history. But if they had it their way, it would be erased from every history book. And the history books are no longer books, it's data.
Yep.
And so I think that's what you're seeing with Flux AI and products like what we're building is they become the truth model to whatever it is that's happening on the other side. There has to be a yin to your yang. So Web3 and what Flux does, yin to yang, right? Um, you can do everything you can do on a centralized world, but it's in a decentralized world and you control your data input models, right? And if you have the exact opposite of that, it's everything's controlled by legacy. Some people will stay there and they'll love that. But AI is not scary whatsoever. They demonize it because they are trying to monopolize it.
Yes.
You know, I've heard
Just like with
people
the
say,
internet.
well, 50% of the workforce is going to be gone in 5 years. No, 50% of the workforce will be utilizing to be more efficient and deliver better products with an AI model than it did before. Does that supplant the people that are working those jobs? No, it changes the dynamic of what they're doing. And I'll give you an absolute for anybody that's not understanding where I'm going here. Okay. We need lawyers. The Influx, the company needs lawyers, right? And we were paying astronomical lawyer bills, right? I mean, because a good lawyer is never cheap, right? Um, we just to draft a terms of service to utilize like the Influx platform or something like that, it would cost you the better part of $10,000, $15,000. So with Flux AI, I can generate those terms of service, redline them appropriately as I want to, send them to my lawyer. He says, yeah, this looks good. I now have taken that, $10,000, $15,000 down to $1,000. Now, do those lawyers go away? No, because you still need that set of human eyes. And by the way, you can't take a robot or AI to court yet. But it does change the dynamic of how they're working. So now they're either on their side going to have to increase the offering and the integrity of their products and reduce their costs appropriately, or they will go the way of the dinosaur. And so that's what I see companies doing is it frees people up from medial tasks that allow them to concentrate on more strategic tasks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I often wonder how does all this, there's always that, okay, it's going to wipe out the workforce, but economies evolved, they constantly evolve. And actually, I think really what it will do is perhaps even add people to the workforce in regards to give them
Yes,
capabilities
absolutely.
that are going to enable them to do jobs that they couldn't previously. So I think it's this very interesting future that we're moving towards. I think one of the things that I really want people to take away from all this is Flux is enabling this.
Yes, it is. And
And that's big.
that's a really astute observation. And a good comparison to that is in the financial sector. At one point in time, they used abacuses and ledgers, right?
Yes.
And imagine somebody walking in the door and say, "I have a calculator," right? I'm not using that calculator, Did that guy's job go away when he got a calculator? No. Did his job go away when he got Microsoft Excel? No. Is it going to go away when he has AI? No. It's going to change. It's going to change. And we're going to be able to build and scale more effectively and quicker in all areas. So, in the end, I think it changes the workforce because it moves away from how to training people how to use AI effectively. By the way, you can use AI and it could be worthless. There is a process to using it and using it well. Changing We're working with a Fortune 100 company right now, right? And they said, this is going to be a huge move for us. How do we do this? Well, you're going to have to put a focus on training and input, right? Show people what they need and how to use it. And then all of a sudden, you're going to cut them loose and they're going to do an amazing job with that. If there was concern for 1 second that AI would truly destroy our economy by because you remove 50% of the workforce, you're looking at UBI, universal basic income. We've got lots of. If there was ever a doubt for 1 second, there would be so many regulatory pieces in play right now. It would blow your mind. It would happen so damn fast. it would be insane. So I think what you're going to see in the end is good regulation, and once the tech sector has made their planted their flag on the moon, right? So that's what I see happening. They're trying to demonize it. They're trying to scare people. Why? Because they want to get ahead of the curve. They want to be the one to go to. So I mean, basically, all it did was once AI came on the scene with ChatGPT, it was the firing of the starting gun. It's
And now the
begun.
race.
The
Yeah, now the race has begun, and we've got to sort of choose how we want to enable that. And I think Flux plays a very important role in all of that. Sticking on the topic of AI, before we do that, one thing that I found very interesting. So my introduction to the crypto space was in the days of Silk Road. I won't go too much into detail in regards to how all that unfolded, but there's some hilarious stories on the back end of it all, as
Oh
I'm sure you
yeah.
can imagine. And I'm over the moon to see that Ross is now free. I know not everybody is, but I think that was a very. I think those days were, albeit
Oh, I
swept
work.
under the rug, important in many
Yeah,
ways.
I worked my ass off for Ross. I'm glad to see he's out. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, this guy got back-to-back life sentences plus, I believe, 20 on top of that. I mean, it was insane. He was the definition of a political prisoner.
Absolutely.
They wanted to make an example out of him, and in the end, it bit him in the ass because the technology evolved enough that he was not only commuted from his sentence, he was vindicated.
Yep.
He was vindicated that he should have never been there in the first place. And the technology has developed immensely since then. And the gentleman from Tornado Cash just got out of
Yes.
jail. You
Just
know,
recently. Yeah.
um, mhm. So you'll see these people that stand up for the technology growth sectors. Ross, what Ross was doing, I wouldn't have done it myself,
Yeah.
but he wasn't wrong.
I,
All
I
he
don't.
was for doing.
I certainly don't have the backbone to do that. He did,
Mhm.
and I mean, unbelievable, right? When you think, when I think back to that and what he enabled back then, I mean, like Amazon are kind of trying to do or doing the same thing today, just not perhaps as interestingly in terms of the products that were, that were going around the world there. If that makes sense.
It's a delivery model, and what Amazon built was a delivery model. They weren't looking to sell books per se. What they were looking to do is create a delivery framework. So it didn't matter what you dropped in that delivery framework, whether it was T-shirts or hats or whatever. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't ever go to the store. I go to the store never. Like literally, I can't even tell you the last time I went into the store. My wife will drag me in every now and again, and I'll mope the whole time.
Yeah.
But in reality, they disrupted every tech sector there was. Whether it's Radio Shack that died because of them, the malls. I mean, when I was a kid, we all went to malls. Man, they were the biggest thing. Our mall in our local town has one store left in it out of like 40.
Yep.
You know, um, so this disruptive technology that was created by Amazon cascaded itself out into all these different tech sectors or all these different product sectors. But really, all they did was build a framework. Flux did the exact same thing. And as a matter of fact, we use that delivery model framework for our product. So it doesn't matter if you're running RWA, if DPIN, Web3, whatever it is, you can run it on top of Flux because it's a delivery model. It's a framework. DeepSeek came out a week ago where you could get at it, right? We said, can we deploy it? Yeah, okay, go deploy it. What the hell?
Yeah.
And it was up and running. You know, we didn't have to do hardly anything to make it happen because we've already created the delivery framework. So we're dropping in the pieces that people need, and it's going to end up cascading to disruption in every area. Which is great because that's what we need to see more of.
I really love the comparison there, actually. I think that's brilliant. In terms of disruptive technology, it also factors into what we spoke about in regards to AI, perhaps doing the opposite of replacing the workforce, actually enabling them. With wiping all those malls out and things like that, sure, people lost jobs, but there was a whole sector and a whole industry, a whole new world that was kind of created on the back end of that. And I think, it's always great to talk to people like yourself that understand technology, understand where it currently is, and understand where it's going, and can perhaps kind of rationalize it, because everyone's quite irrational, I think, when it comes to AI and tech more broadly. And I think understanding's an issue with all of that. One of the things that I really love is, and I can't remember who said it or where I even heard it, but if we had had a distributed ledger from the dawn of time, we'd have a very different history.
Yeah, we would have a different history. The good news is we got it now, right?
Yes.
It's like the meme that said, Step Brothers when they have their night vision goggles on and they're looking at each other and you said, "Man, I wish I had these when we were kid." Even better, we have them now,
Yeah.
right? We have it now. So we've already said history up to this point in time. We can reflect back on what the challenges were, where the control pieces came into play, how we were controlled as a population. And we could say, this is not what we want moving forward. We want something that's open to all, highly available, doesn't suck down your data. And I want to mention something too, because I think this is important about Amazon. As Amazon was building this framework, this dropout model, they all of a sudden realized that they had to build the technology to deliver this, right? So if this framework is here, how do I get it to where it's actually viable for the customer? They're able to deliver it. So they created internally AWS. AWS was built for Amazon to deliver their technology deployment. And then halfway through the process, they're like, well, if we can do it ourselves, why don't we sell it? And now it's 50%, 55% of their total income. Amazon's, which blows my mind, right? So a byproduct that they created of building out their product was an infrastructure model that they could then sell. So what we did is we took that exact same model, but we changed it, tweaked it slightly so that we're the ones that are going to capitalize on it. The people are going to capitalize. So instead of Jeff and 60% of that money going into his pocket and Amazon, it goes back into the hands of the people. It goes back into the hands that are of the people that are providing the infrastructure and providing the resources that people are utilizing. So it is a paradigm shift completely with Flux. It doesn't look like anything we've ever done before in technology.
And I'm going to encourage everyone to make sure that they go and check Flux out. There's still quite a bit that I want to talk about in regards to actually where Flux currently is. You guys have been around for a long time. You mentioned at the start, actually, that's a real achievement in the cryptocurrency space. There's so many projects that are here today, gone tomorrow. The fact that you guys have, and forgive me for saying this, I think largely flown under the radar.
No, I think that's exactly what we've done, and it's not. It was by design. We didn't want to. We didn't want it to create a haphazard product that people go to and utilize, and then they're like, "This sucks. This is not even good technology." When you could have a Fortune 100 company and their CTO deploy something on Flux and be like, "This is simple as hell. I love it. I love the structure of it. I love how it's I can just go deploy. I don't have to worry about it. Have DRP baked in. With Arcane, we have end-to-end full encryption on all data that's running on the network. We have our own operating system that facilitates this. Could we have done this 5 years ago? No, the technology wasn't there yet. The whole purpose of disruptive technology is to build the crap that hasn't been done yet, and we're not replicating something that was done in Web 2. So it does change everything holistically.
Yeah, and I want to talk about where Flux is currently at right now. So we've mentioned a number of people. We mentioned companies that are building some of the amazing things you can do. What are some of the things that you're looking at in regards to your creation and kind of going, wow, this is, I mean, there's so much, but some of the things right now, because you can really do anything on Flux, it is a total paradigm shift. It is enabling, I think, the future, certainly the digital future. And we want, a project like Flux to be an enabler of that future for some of the reasons that we spoke about. When you're looking at your creation, what are you kind of going, wow, this is, because I think in the crypto space, we always see projects start out and then become very different things 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line. Your journey,
Yeah.
where are you at now? What are you kind of sat there going, wow, this is insane. This is extremely interesting how far we came and some of the things that are actually taking place today. Because this is here, guys. This isn't a pipe dream. We're not talking about things to come in the future. This is being enabled now.
You can go do everything that we talk about today on Flux. Runonflux.io is or runonflux.com is the website. And you can go in there and you can see Flux Gaming, which is deploying like game servers, Pal World, all these different games that I've never even heard of, but the kids love them, right? You can utilize Flux AI today. You can use Flux One, which is our image generator. We have Flux Intel, which is basically brings all your data sets together and then extrapolates that data, provide analyses. I think the thing that probably has amazed me the most, I never doubted for 1 second that we would get the Web3 piece solved, right? How to deploy something in a decentralized manner, not rely on Web2 for your infrastructure. The biggest thing that probably surprised me was Flux AI. Flux AI was a skunkwork project, had no intention of becoming like a cornerstone for our product. But we had built such a strong infrastructure with Flux Edge, so we have access to 10,500 GPUs, and then on Flux itself mining, there's 30,000 plus GPUs. And all of a sudden, as we started building this out, we realized very quickly that our thesis that you could drop anything into our framework would all of a sudden become realized. And it's by far starting to be our biggest part of our project. So a skunkwork project that was put on the back burner had been developed, was just kind of chilling there. And all of a sudden there was a click in technology, and now we're dropping it in, and now that becomes one of our products. So I think the biggest thing in technology should never be complacent and think that the technology stack you have today will be the technology stack you have in 5 years or even a year from now. People always ask me, well, what if this happens? I'm like, great. That's even more chance for us to change. Um, Large businesses, historically, they don't enjoy change. We love it. We relish it. I always tell the team, if you're not breaking shit, it's not tech, right? It's not iterative tech. And trust me, we break quite a bit. But but I will say this: 8 years and our blockchain's never been down. How many projects can go to you and say, we've been up 24/7, 365 for 8 years? Um, when we put together like a proposal for a company or something we're working with, or maybe it's a labs project that comes in and they're wanting to develop, and we say, well, we're going to put 99.999999% uptime. We can't put 100 because nobody would even believe that, right? 100% uptime. But really, as long as you've set it up correctly, there is no downtime with Flux. AWS goes down, their data center goes down, they're down. Flux goes down and we lose a data center, maybe that's in the States, don't matter. We've got 13,000 plus all across, and it's already been deployed on 3 different data sets or data infrastructures. So I think the biggest surprise for me was how hard it was to develop this, but then how easily people start to see it and adopt it. And Flux AI was definitely a game changer. WordPress on Flux was a game changer. I mean, we're pennies on the dollar for developing and maintaining your website. We charge no egress data, so people that were paying exorbitant amount of money to Amazon AWS for egress, you don't have that issue. And by the way, that's highly incentivizing to people that are building a company. I can't afford $1,500 a month in egress. With Flux, now I only have to pay the $40, and they've set almost like a monopoly across the big 3 or 4 of what the price of this infrastructure costs. Flux has no overhead. So we have no data centers that we have to maintain. We don't even have to source power. And by the way, we could talk about the fact that we couldn't even scale AI unless we have something like Flux. It's impossible to build the data centers. I mean, Trump came out and said we're going to build 10 data centers. That's nothing.
Yep.
That's absolutely nothing. To get to where we need to get, we need hundreds of thousands of data centers to come online. And how do you source power for that? How do you source resources for that? Now, all of a sudden, you have these massive colo data centers. With Flux, we don't care about any of that. We don't source the power. We don't source the infrastructure. We just provide the mechanism to connect the people that need compute resources to the people that have compute resources. And we do it private and in a decentralized manner. That's
Wow.
a huge paradigm shift from where things have been.
Wow. It generally does give me kind of goosebumps a little bit when I talk about this, because this is unbelievably big. I mean, on more than one front, and that's really what I want people to take away from this, is just the kind of mammoth task that has been undertook, but actually now is bearing fruit. And it's very obvious that what you guys are doing makes sense from multiple different angles. And I think when that kind of realization takes place, and it's happening now, the floodgates open. You know, I keep comparing us to the sort of financial system. Again, I think this is bigger, just because the financial
I
system.
think it's the dot. I
Yeah.
think what we're seeing is the beginning layer of the .com boom,
Yep.
because what you're going to see is a mass exodus from Web 2 to become the first one on Web 3. I'll give you a perfect example. You got YouTube, which is a juggernaut, and of course they control things the way they want to control it. Along comes Rumble, who says we're not going to control anything that goes on there. Rumble could take it a step further and say we're not going to rely on data centers that Google provides. We're not going to rely on data centers that Amazon provides. These are all going to be community ran, community involved infrastructure that supplies our data set. Now you no longer have to worry about the front end, the back end. It's all maintained. So, um, yeah, it's something. It takes a while for people to kind of grasp Flux, but once they do, they're like, "Oh, this is a freaking game changer." I mean, I get people to come to me all the time and they're like, "I fell down the rabbit hole and I just can't believe that you guys aren't bigger than what you are right now." And the reason that is cuz we've done it that way. We wanted it that way. I love bear markets. I know people are out there, "Oh, we want bull markets, number go up." Man, I'm sitting back here building the world-changing technology while you guys are trading meme coins. You know what I mean? So, it's a win-win. You know what I mean? Eventually, that capital flows back into projects that actually make a difference. So, um, we're excited to be positioned where we're at because there is nobody like Flux or doing nothing like what Flux is doing. There are other deep in projects like an Akash, and I love Greg and I love that project. And I think they'll all work together. They're like, who's your competition? I don't have competition. We have opportunity. We have opportunity to work with other projects to help them become more decentralized and also help us expand our tech sector because we're going to be in iterative technology. You should have multiple projects working together. So
Wow.
I think it makes sense to work with other Web3 and DeepIn projects to really holistically grow what the new version of the internet is.
Yeah. Wow. 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 I've got to ask you about Trump. So we're seeing a lot of things going on right now in regards to the US, and certainly a lot of rumors and speculation in regards to US cryptos that, you know, Trump's administration, the crypto czar, are going to essentially try and push, enable, use to maintain their global dominance from a technology standpoint. Where do you think Flux fits into all that? Does it fit into all that? Is there a crossover there? Is there a link there? What do you think about it generally? Some questions for you.
I spent a lot of time in DC. One of my personal initiatives, right, and it's with the company as well, and for the project. You really got to look at Flux in two different ways. Flux is the open source, decentralized compute network that anyone can use. We have Influx, which builds and develops products on top of Flux, but we moved out of the states a long time ago. The regulatory environment was harsh. We ended up landing in the UK. And I can tell you right now, we never shut down our U.S. subsidiary, and we are in the process of starting to move back to the United States. Why? Because I've spent enough time talking with people in DC to figure out that they know the value add of what's coming with DPIN, and I believe that there will be a regulatory guidance and framework that is favorable for development. And the states does this well if we don't have a bureaucracy in place that's basically smothers innovation. And we've seen this with Operation Choke Point 2.0, a direct assault on anyone building in the blockchain space, and totally unfavorable to building technology. That's not how we are in the states. It's how we've never been like that. And now we finally have somebody in place who sees the financial gain, not necessarily the holistic intrinsic gain of it, right? Um, the intrinsic gain of the cypherpunk motto that everybody controls their own assets, mind your business, kind of thing. And they don't necessarily see it that for the intrinsic. They see the value add it'll bring to them from an economic standpoint. So, if Trump creates a strategic reserve of blockchain, which I believe he's going to do, I don't think it's just going to be Bitcoin. I think you're going to see lots of projects. Flux will be right there in that conversation. I can tell you that. Because we are Influx was born a U.S. company. We are we're a global project, but we set our roots. The founders set our roots here in the States, and we want to make we Flux. You don't have to make Flux great again. It's always been great, but we definitely need to make DePIN great again in the States. And here's the other thing: they understand that the tides are changing, and they're going to have to get ahead of the technology. I mean, I had a chance to sit with a bunch of Democrats from the House. And historically, Democrats have been truly anti-crypto. Attack, 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 attack. It's a scam. It's this, that, or the other thing. They realize now that the shoe is on the other foot. Now Trump moves into office. Could I be targeted? Could I be an issue? Everything that I was doing could be done to me now. And all of a sudden, they're starting to see the value add that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency brings into it. So if we utilize our government as a weapon, eventually there'll be a weapon that's utilized against the government. And that's exactly what crypto was born for. It's a check and balance. It's not looking to take away the power of the government. It's looking to keep them honest. And that's exactly, I mean, the libertarian in me says dethrone them all, right? Take them all down. But the realist in me also realizes this is something we'll have to do. We'll have to win this by a battle of attrition.
Yes.
So
it's fascinating.
yeah.
No, and I'm really excited to sort of, Flux is a project that I've been paying attention to for a while now. I'm going to be paying even more attention after talking to yourself, and I should have been anyway. And I hope people listening to this, I hope if you're interested in the crypto space, this is one place that you stumble upon. Because again, Flux is an amazing example of the broader application of a distributed ledger and just how transformational it is. What we're talking about, the task you guys are trying to undertake, and I think going to do an amazing job of, already are, is mammoth. And this brings me on to my final question for you, and that is in regards to, in the next 5 years, and we know how hard this, a year ahead can often be hard to predict. But in the next 5 years, 10 years, what do you want for Flux? Where do you see Flux?
I think there's two silos in Flux. I think you have retail, which is historically people that want to deploy a website or run a game server or maybe a backend. But then I think you have the enterprise sector, and I think real value adds is when you can start combining a hybrid setup of those two, so they intersect. Essentially, you understand what Web 2.5 is doing. I say Web 2.5 because they're kind of dabbling into blockchain, but they're not quite there yet. So we kind of identify it as retail and enterprise. And what I think Flux has done really well is start to identify those enterprise opportunities to start to bring large demand to the network. And it's also started to stimulate retail by providing real use case scenarios, because really people may not necessarily care that it's decentralized. They care that it's cheaper. And we have that out of the box, right? And unless Amazon just starts to give AWS away for free, they're never going to beat us there. It's going to change the paradigm over there. So what I'd like to see us take 1, 2, 3, 5% of the global compute market. And I think it's very possible to do so over the next 5 years. And I'll tell you why. Because people are like, this guy's insane. How can you take 5% of the global compute market? Well, we're already working with the biggest global compute providers. Lumens, OVHs, Digital Oceans, you name it. These are the people that are currently providing Web 2, and they're already working with us. So even if we do it vicariously through enterprises and we offer Lumen customers the ability to deploy on Flux, we offer OVH customers the ability to deploy on Flux, we start to gain traction where this Web 2, Web 3 starts to meld together, and people just look at it as technology. They don't necessarily look at it as, you know, disruptive technology per se. It's disruptive to us because we're going after every market just about. But for them, it's just tech. I'm just sourcing technology that I've been paying an exorbitant amount for, and now I don't have to. And by the way, I get to control my own data. I don't have to give up my, my IP, so on and so forth. So I think Flux, my personal opinion, because I can't, I'm not an investment advisor. I don't tell you to run out and buy Flux or anything. Do your due diligence. You know what I mean? Um, I think we're going to be right there in the mix. I think you're going to see us up there with, the AWSs, the Microsoft Azures. Flux will be a natural transitional piece, and people are going to want to gravitate toward that just for the pure benefits that we're delivering that had been an expense in the past is an expense no more.
Wow.
So and the other thing is we're working on a Web3 DePIN consortium where we're starting to work with lobbying in DC to explain things. The other big pieces I see traditionally are Flux education piece that we're going to release, and we have a product from Flux AI that's specifically for schools, colleges, where there's a direct interface with a professor, so they know that you're not using AI to cheat. You're using it as a reference tool. That means you, Natalie, my daughter, who
Yeah.
for whatever reason is using Flux AI
Yeah.
to play around with it. But I always mess with her. I'm like, well, everything you put in there, I'm going to know about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to know. She's not going to know, right? But she doesn't need to know that I don't know that I won't know. So I think it'll be embraced. I think this technology set will be embraced. And I've always said there's two methods of adoption: by attrition or necessity. And I think we're finishing up the attrition piece, and now it becomes necessity. And I think that's where Flux really comes into play.
Wow. Dan, this has been absolutely great. We're going to leave links to where you can find Flux all over the internet in the description. Is there anywhere you would like people to go specifically? Of course, watching this is a great start. When you start to
Yeah.
go down that rabbit hole, it's a very deep one. Dan, where would you like people to go and explore more?
I think the big thing is to check out runonflux.com, start digging through our white paper, read that, do your research. Do not invest in Flux until you've become completely understanding in the process and what it's doing. Because we're not one of these pump and dump shit coins. We're like a legitimate project. And, everybody else says, hey, we're a crypto project. We're not a crypto project. We're a blockchain project that happens to utilize crypto as a utility asset. And I think that if people start to research and fall down that rabbit hole, I think you'll, just like you'll start to see the value add immediately. And in terms of the adoption bell curve, like this is the bell curve: early adopters, laggards, so on and so forth. We're not even in that beginning, that trough. We're not even here, right? So if you're listening to this, you're unbelievably early, because Flux is not even 0.001% of the global compute market, right? Uh, so you are in year 3 or year 4 of Amazon
Well,
with Flux. So go check it out, man. That's all I can say. And come join our Discord. Ask questions. We have the best community in all of blockchain, without a doubt. Highly engaged, highly visible. No shill. We don't ever shill anything. Just come in and enjoy and learn. That's all we ask.
well, I can attest to that. And what you're saying is right. You don't need to shill. You've got the product. I love your approach to this whole thing. I love what you guys are doing. I love everything about Flux. Ladies and gentlemen, there are links in the description. Dan, this has been an absolute blast. I really do hope we can get you on again sometime soon. And of course,
Happy
we'll
to.
keep you guys up to date on everything happening with Flux. Dan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, buddy, and I appreciate it.